Before we start, tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because what happens in this story will leave you speechless. The morning rush had just begun at the Rosewood Cafe, a small restaurant tucked in the corner of downtown, the kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee mixed with soft jazz and the chatter of tired customers. Amara Lewis moved swiftly between the tables, balancing a tray of steaming plates like she'd done it all her life. Her uniform was simple, black shirt, name tag slightly crooked, and her hair tied back neatly. To most people, she was just another waitress smiling politely while taking orders she didn't have time to eat herself. But what no one knew was that Amara wasn't just working for tips. She was working for a dream. Every dollar she earned went toward her tuition, the life she'd promised her late father she'd build. And despite the exhaustion written in her eyes, there was fire behind them, quiet, determined, unbreakable. That morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside. It didn't belong to the usual crowd. When the door opened, a sharply dressed man in his late 20s stepped out first. His suit screamed money. The gold watch on his wrist caught the sunlight as he turned to help an elderly woman out of the car. She was small, delicate, with soft silver hair and a kind face, but her movements were slow, careful, and her eyes didn't seem to follow the sounds around her. Amara noticed immediately the way the younger man tapped her hand to get her attention, the way her lips moved silently when she responded. She was deaf. They walked inside and heads turned. Everyone knew who he was. Ethan Grant, the young CEO whose name appeared in business magazines, known for his luxury lifestyle and impossible standards. He didn't come to small cafes like this, but today he had brought someone important, his grandmother Eleanor Grant, a woman the city once called the heart behind the empire. Amara quickly grabbed 2 menus and approached their table. "Good morning," she said with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Rosewood Cafe. My name is Amara, so what can I get you today?" Ethan barely looked up from his phone. "Just coffee for me," he said. Then he looked at his grandmother, who gave a puzzled expression. She hadn't heard him. Ethan sighed louder this time. "Grandma, coffee, black like usual." The woman smiled faintly, nodding slowly. Amara watched the exchange quietly, noticing how detached it felt, mechanical, rushed, without warmth. When Amara placed their order, she paused for a moment, then leaned slightly closer to Eleanor. Her hands moved gracefully in the air, forming a phrase in American Sign Language. "Good morning. How are you today?" The old woman's eyes widened. Then a smile spread across her face. The kind of smile that carried years of loneliness suddenly lifted. She signed back quickly, her fingers trembling with excitement. "You know how to sign?" Amara nodded, smiling softly. "A little," she signed back. "Enough to talk." Ethan looked up, confused. "What's happening?" he asked. His grandmother was laughing silently, her eyes bright for the first time that morning. "She's talking to me," Eleanor signed to him, pointing at Amara. Ethan frowned, half amused, half annoyed. "You know sign language?" Amara nodded politely. "Yes, sir. My father was deaf. He taught me when I was a kid." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. "Well, that's convenient." His tone was dismissive, but Eleanor didn't seem to notice. She was too busy chatting through her hands, asking Amara where she learned, how long she'd been working there, and whether she liked her job. Amara answered every question with kindness, her hands moving fluently. The 2 of them shared a silent laughter that filled the air with warmth even though no sound was made. Other customers began to notice, a young black waitress and a wealthy old woman speaking without words. Something about it drew eyes. Maybe it was the grace of it. Maybe it was how genuine it looked. When Amara brought their food, she gently touched Eleanor's shoulder to let her know she was there, then placed a napkin folded neatly with a small note written on it. "If you ever want to try our new desserts, I'll make sure you get the best one." Eleanor read it, smiled wide, and tapped Amara's hand affectionately. For the first time in months, someone had spoken to her, really spoken to her, in her language. Ethan checked his watch impatiently. "We should go," he said. "I've got a meeting in 20. Eleanor frowned, signing something sharp. Amara caught it. "You always have meetings. You never have time for people." Amara pretended not to understand, but the words lingered. Ethan stood, tossing a few bills on the table. a tip far too small for someone of his wealth. But Amara didn't flinch. She smiled politely as they left, waving goodbye to Eleanor, who signed softly, "Thank you." As the door closed, Amara exhaled slowly. For her, it was just another table. But something about the encounter stayed in her chest like a quiet melody. The old woman's eyes had been full of stories, of silence that begged to be heard. What Amara didn't know was that Eleanor couldn't stop talking about her on the way home. She told her grandson, with her hands in her heart, that the young waitress at that cafe had more kindness than all the executives in his office combined. Ethan had laughed, brushing it off as a sweet old woman's whim. But that small encounter had planted a seed, one that neither of them knew would change everything. That night, as the cafe lights dimmed and Amara counted the last of her tips, a storm began to gather in her life, one that would test her patience, her kindness, and the secret she had carried for years. Because what started as a simple act of compassion would soon reveal something that no one, not even the millionaire, was ready to face. A week passed, and the Rosewood Cafe carried on as usual. The smell of pancakes, the chatter of regulars, the hum of life moving too fast to notice small miracles. But that morning, when Amara walked in for her shift, something felt different. Her manager, a cheerful woman named Gina, waved her over. "Hey, Amara," she said with a grin. "You've got a visitor waiting at table 6. Amara frowned. Visitors weren't a thing for her. She didn't have friends who could afford cappuccinos at 9 in the morning. But when she turned toward table 6, her heart skipped. Sitting there, smiling with unmistakable joy, was Mrs. Eleanor Grant. She was dressed elegantly again, pearls around her neck, but this time there was no chauffeur or bodyguard in sight. Just her, sitting quietly with a cup of tea and a notepad. Amara hurried over, her face lighting up. "Mrs. Grant," she greeted softly, then signed, "It's good to see you again." Eleanor's eyes sparkled. "You remembered me?" she signed back. "Of course," Amara replied with her hands. "You don't forget people who smile like that." The old woman chuckled silently, then pointed to the seat across from her, inviting Amara to sit for a moment. Amara hesitated. She wasn't supposed to sit during her shift, but Gina, watching from the counter, gave her a small nod of approval. They talked for nearly 10 minutes in sign language, their conversation effortless. Eleanor asked about Amara's family, her studies, her dreams. Amara confessed that she wanted to become a speech therapist one day, to help people with communication barriers, like her father once had. "He lost his hearing after an accident when I was little," she explained, her hands moving slower now. "He taught me to listen with my heart." Eleanor's eyes glistened. She reached across the table and held Amara's hand for a brief, tender moment, her touch full of warmth that only a grandmother could give. When Ethan walked into the cafe a few minutes later, that warmth evaporated into tension. His eyes locked on the sight of Amara sitting beside his grandmother, chatting like old friends. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. The entire cafe seemed to freeze. Eleanor waved her hand, signing something fast. Amara translated calmly. "She says she invited me to sit. She wanted to talk." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Grandma, you can't just wander off without telling anyone. The driver's been looking for you." Eleanor ignored him, signing stubbornly, "You never listen." "She listens." Amara didn't dare translate that part. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're very good with her," he said finally. "It's rare to find someone patient enough." Amara just smiled politely. "It's not patience," she said softly. "It's respect." For the first time, Ethan's expression shifted, not arrogance, but something quieter, curiosity. He nodded slightly, then gestured to his grandmother. "She hasn't smiled this much in months," he admitted. "Thank you for that." Amara didn't reply, but the gratitude in her eyes said enough. The following days, Mrs. Grant returned again and again. Each time she asked specifically for Amara. They became a sight at the cafe, the elderly woman and the young waitress communicating in graceful silence while the world buzzed around them. Customers whispered, staff smiled. It was beautiful, like a language only kindness could translate. But one afternoon as they talked, Eleanor signed something that made Amara pause. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Someone I lost." Amara looked curious. "Who?" she asked. Eleanor's eyes softened with memory. "My son, Ethan's father. She explained in slow, careful signs how he'd died young, how Ethan had been raised to be strong, successful. But somewhere along the way, he forgot softness, forgot how to listen. "You teach him that again," Eleanor said, her hands trembling slightly. Amara's throat tightened. "I'm just a waitress," she signed with a smile. "No one listens to people like me." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "They will. One day they'll see you." That night, when Amara finished her shift, a sleek car was waiting outside again. But this time Ethan stepped out alone. "My grandmother wanted me to bring you this," he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a simple thank you card written in elegant handwriting. But there was something else folded behind it. An invitation. "You are cordially invited to the Grant Foundation Gala." Amara blinked in disbelief. "I think there's a mistake," she said quickly. Ethan smirked. "No mistake," she insisted. "Said you're the only person she actually wants there." Amara hesitated, her mind spinning. "I don't belong at an event like that." Ethan tilted his head. "Maybe that's exactly why you should come." When he left, the city lights glimmered on the pavement and Amara stood there, the envelope in her trembling hands. The thought of walking into a room full of millionaires made her chest tighten, but she could still see Eleanor's smile in her mind, a smile that said, "Believe in yourself, even when no one else does." She knew she couldn't refuse. But what Amara didn't know was that the gala would reveal not just her courage, but the truth she'd been hiding for years, a truth that would leave everyone, including the millionaire, speechless. The night of the Grant Foundation Gala arrived like a dream Amara couldn't quite believe was real. She stood outside the towering glass building, her reflection shimmering in the windows as limousines pulled up one after another. The world inside was golden, chandeliers sparkling, laughter echoing, people dressed in gowns that cost more than a year's rent. Amara wore a simple navy dress she'd borrowed from Gina, her curls falling freely over her shoulders, a silver pendant resting against her collarbone. As she took a deep breath and stepped inside, the room seemed to slow. Eyes turned not because of her wealth or fame, but because of something else, the quiet confidence she carried like a secret light. At the far end of the ballroom, she spotted Mrs. Eleanor Grant sitting gracefully at a grand table, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found Amara. The moment she did, her face lit up with joy. She waved eagerly, motioning her over. Ethan stood beside her, looking sharp in a tuxedo, his usual arrogance softened by something unfamiliar, pride maybe, or curiosity. "You came," he said when Amara approached. "I told Grandma you wouldn't," Amara smiled. "She can be very convincing." Eleanor laughed silently, signing, "I told you she would." As the evening went on, Amara found herself seated beside the family at their table. It felt surreal. Businessmen, politicians, and celebrities floated around the room, but Eleanor didn't care for any of them. She focused only on Amara, signing and smiling, introducing her proudly as "my friend." The staff serving that night, people Amara had once worked beside, watched in quiet disbelief. The waitress who used to serve tables was now sitting with the richest family in the city. But not everyone in the crowd was kind. Whispered remarks followed, comments about class, background, and race. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "Grant's new charity project?" Another chuckled. Ethan heard it, his jaw tightening. For once, he didn't laugh. During the speeches, Ethan was called to the stage to thank the guests for attending. He spoke about the foundation's work, hospitals, schools, donations, all the right words rehearsed and polished. But when he turned toward his grandmother, something changed in his voice. "Tonight," he said slowly, "my grandmother reminded me of something. Success means nothing if you forget how to listen and how to understand people." His gaze drifted to Amara, who sat still, surprised. "There's someone here who taught me that without even trying. She reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength." The crowd turned to look. A few clapped politely, not fully understanding. But Eleanor's face glowed with pride, her hands clapping joyfully in the air. After the speeches, Amara slipped away to the balcony, needing a moment to breathe. The city stretched endlessly beneath her, lights flickering like 1,000 tiny dreams. She didn't hear Ethan approach until he spoke softly. "You know, I used to think people like you and me lived in different worlds." Amara smiled faintly. "We do, but that doesn't mean we can't meet halfway." He leaned on the railing beside her. "You're different," he said. "You make her happy. You make people feel seen." She looked at him then, the moonlight catching her eyes. "Everyone deserves to be seen," she said. "Especially people who've been silent too long." Ethan hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something personal? Why did you really learn sign language?" Amara's expression softened. "Because my father never heard my voice," she whispered. "He lost his hearing when I was 5. But he used to sign to me every night, telling me stories about how silence can be full of meaning if you know how to listen. When he passed, I promised him I'd never stop listening." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. Ethan looked at her, his usual confidence gone, replaced by something raw. "He'd be proud of you," he said quietly. "You changed my grandmother's life." Before Amara could respond, the ballroom doors opened behind them. One of Ethan's business partners, a slick man in a grey suit, stepped out, sneering. "Ethan, there you are. I didn't know we were inviting the help to the gala this year." His words cut sharp through the night. Ethan froze, his old instinct to laugh it off battling the new sense of decency awakening in him. But before he could speak, Eleanor appeared at the doorway, having seen the whole thing. She walked straight up to the man, her posture regal, her eyes fierce. She signed furiously, and Amara translated aloud for the room now watching. "She says this young woman has more grace in her hands than you have in your entire body. She reminds me of what humanity looks like. Maybe you should learn to listen instead of talk." The man went red, mumbling an apology before hurrying off. The room fell silent, then broke into quiet applause. Eleanor stood beside Amara, holding her hand high like a victory. Ethan watched, stunned, realizing just how much he still had to learn. When the night ended, Eleanor pulled Amara into an embrace, her fingers signing gently, "You are family now." Tears glimmered in Amara's eyes as she nodded. Ethan offered to drive her home, but she refused with a smile. "I'll walk," she said. "Some journeys are better taken on foot." As she stepped into the cool night air, she looked up at the stars, whispering a thank you to the father who had taught her the language of the heart. The next morning, Rosewood Cafe was busier than ever. But this time, when the door opened and Ethan Grant walked in, he wasn't the arrogant millionaire everyone knew. He walked straight to the counter, rolled up his sleeves and asked, "Got room for one more on staff today?" Gina almost dropped a cup. Amara blinked, half laughing. "You?" she asked. He shrugged. "Figured I should learn how to really listen to people." They both smiled. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the cafe, Mrs. Grant watched through the window, her hands folded in contentment. That day, the cafe buzzed with laughter and light. Two worlds that weren't meant to meet had found a way to speak the same language. And though no one said it aloud, everyone felt it. The waitress, the millionaire, the grandmother. All changed by a language that didn't need sound to be heard.